What's up, guys? M. Jones back in the house again for another update. And today's update is going to be a list, a top 10 list. A top 10 list of, in my opinion, the funniest actors that are alive today. I've been wanting to do a list like this for a long time. You know, the lists that I've done before are my top 10 most annoying actors and top 10 most annoying actresses. I did this a while ago. Well, today I'm more on the positive note. I'm going over the people who I think are just so funny. You know, and these are not the kind of people that I think, boy, those writers did a great job to make he or she so funny. These are people who I just think are just out of this world, just so funny. And before I do my list, so you kind of get an idea of what my list consists of, I'm going to give you some honorable mentions. And the honorable mentions are those that, yeah, they're pretty funny. You know, I have laughed before, but they just didn't make the list. Okay, so this is going to kind of give you a taste of what my top 10 list might be, because I'm not going to put in the description. I want you to follow each and every single one that I say, because I want it to be a surprise to you. So I'm going to give you my honorable mentions first, and I have 3 honorable mentions. I'm going to say my first honorable mention is Kevin Hart. You know, I think he is just absolutely off the wall with what he does. I think he improvs like crazy. I think he definitely writes his own material. I just think he's just so naturally funny. I do think he's the kind of guy that fame will go to his head a little too much and become a monster. I do think that. But for right now, man, I think he's just so naturally funny. And I know he's a comedian, so he has that on display a lot for his comedy. But his acting chops are pretty okay. But I think, like in the movie Ride Along, I mean, he's just so funny in that movie. And anything he does right now, I just laugh at. And I just think he's so probably the most self-deprecating black comedian there is right now. And the fact he's an actor just makes it even better. So I think he's definitely worth honorable mention. My second honorable mention would be Vince Vaughn. And you're probably like, how is he not on your list? Well, you know what? I think he's really good. I think he has some acting chops where he can go drama, he can go comedy, he can even go mysterious, all that kind of stuff. But I just think that he didn't make the list just because he's kind of just phased out. You know, I feel like his humor is just a little too much in your face. And a lot of people either love it or hate it, you know. And I think the ones that love it have gone more towards just backing off. So that's why he didn't make the list for me. And that's my opinion. That's, you know, exactly, it is my opinion. And the third one is Nick Offerman. And you're probably wondering, who the hell is Nick Offerman? Nick Offerman is the Ron Swanson from Parks and Recreation. I mean, he's just so dry humor. It's ridiculous. I love everything about Nick Offerman, but hey, he didn't make the list. There's others that I love more. But I wanted to bring him up somehow. I had to. You know, I think everything he does is great. I love his dry sense of humor. I love his character on Parks and Rec. And I feel like he's just a naturally funny guy that he doesn't have to think too much. You know, I think he just goes right off, you know, right off what he feels, and everything he does is just so dry-witted, and it's great. I love him. But he didn't make the list. But I had to get that off my chest first, just so you kind of have an idea what this list could consist of. Because if it's any of those 3 that I already mentioned and you're thinking, how are they not on your list? Well, here we go. Let's go. So number 10 for me, top 10 funniest living actors. All right, number 10 for me is Jake Johnson. If you don't know who that is, you're probably going to kick yourself, because this guy, I think, has a huge future in comedy just because he's just so like your normal, typical guy. Like there's nothing too flashy about him. He doesn't look like some pompous asshole. He just looks like a normal guy that, hey, let's go get a couple beers, let's go tell some lies, and let's have a good time. He's just that kind of guy. Now, Jake Johnson, his probably most notable role to date is probably he was in Drinking Buddies with Ron Livingston and Olivia Wilde and Anna Kendrick. He was in that. He was also in No Strings Attached. And he always plays like the friend of the top billed actor. And he's always funny. Like everything he does, he's just a goofball. And I feel like he doesn't have to be directed. He just, you know, they say, Jake, you know, remember that script? Well, do a little bit with it, but then just, you know, go with it. Go with whatever you want. And he's just like, you know, okay, I will. So I just love him for that fact that I think he's just so original. And the next movie he's supposed to be in It's called Let's Be Cops, and I think it comes out next Friday. Don't hold me to that. I believe next Friday, and I just can't wait. I cannot wait to see that movie. And I think he's just such a goofball. Like he reminds me of kind of like a younger Ben Stiller in a way, just because seems to be very self-deprecating. And I just think he's going to be really a great comedic actor for the next like 30, 40 years. So that's my number 10. My number 9 would be Jason Segel. I think Jason Segel, again, another real self-deprecating guy. Someone doesn't take himself too serious, because I absolutely cannot stand people like that. So I just appreciate how he is as an actor and seems to be as a person. I've seen a lot of interviews with him, and I've seen a lot of like YouTube videos where it's like meeting, a fan meeting an actor, and a lot of the videos of him meeting his fans, he's super cool, super patient, and in my opinion seems incredibly genuine. And besides all that mushy bullshit, he's also funny as hell. Like, he is so funny. Forgetting Sarah Marshall, amazing. I Love You Man, amazing. And everything he does, he's great. I even loved his role in Knocked Up, where he always hit on Leslie Mann. And like, no matter what, he'd always hit on her. I just loved that. It was just so funny to me. And I love that, when I was younger, I remember seeing his first movie, which I believe was either Dead Man on Campus with Mark Paul Gosselaar, or it was Can't Hardly Wait with Ethan Embry and Seth Green. I'm not sure which one was first, but I remember seeing him when I was much young. I was in my early teens, if not like 10, 11, 12 years old. And then I remember seeing him on that show, How I Met Your Mother. And I'm like, wait, wasn't that guy in Can't Hardly Wait and Dead Man on Campus? And I'm like, boom, I was right. So, he's just a great actor, and he's also a great comedic actor. And, I just think he can be a really sweet guy, like a John Candy sweet kind of guy. And then he can be funny as hell, like just like a Robin Williams kind of guy. Just so funny and genius humor. But I love him very much as an actor and comedic actor, and he's my number 9. My number 8, and this is because he has the sweet humor, the real like kind humor, Paul Rudd. I just think he's just a very likable human being. He always makes me laugh. I always pull for him, no matter what the role is in the movie. I'm always hoping like he has a happy ending to whatever he wants in the movie. And I think he's so naturally funny that people just kind of forget about him, because he just looks like kind of the square, typical mid 30s, 40s kind of guy that just, he's like the soccer dad, or he's just kind of like the computer programmer, or he's the guy that was, if we're gonna mention a movie, I Love You Man, he's the guy that does the fencing club. Like, he's that kind of guy, but he's so damn funny being that guy. And I've seen him so many times in interviews. He was just always such a delightful person to be, to speak with and stuff like that. And I would love to meet him. And he just always makes me laugh. Like, everything he does, it's just like cheesy, corny, silly, but very just sweet, kind humor. And he's the kind of guy that you just know won't ever harm a fly. But he's the kind of guy that also stick up for himself at the same time. I really like his humor. But Paul Rudd, number 8. Number 7 for me, this was a tough one between him and Paul Rudd at 8 and 7. But Ashton Kutcher, Ashton Kutcher to me, when I was much younger and he was much younger, I kind of thought he was just your typical like dumbass kind of actor. But and I say that because I grew up with him. We grew up watching him in that '70s show as Mike Kelso, and Kelso's character was just a complete dumbass. And the guy did it so well. I was like, well, this Ashton Kutcher guy must be like that. And then I saw Dude, Where's My Car? I'm like, yeah, he must be a dumbass. But then I started seeing more movies of him, like No Strings Attached, where he was really funny, but just a really nice person. And then I saw him, in the movie Guess Who with the late Bernie Mac and Zoe Saldana. And I saw him be real serious about loving her very much and proving to her parents how much he loves her. So I started seeing a better side of him. And, in the movie, I forget the movie he was in with the late Brittany Murphy, where they're on their honeymoon or something like that. And it just goes crazy and just goes all out of whack. Like, he showed me just so much just different dynamics and his versatility of acting. So I really liked him more so as the years gone on. In the very beginning, I thought he was just too goofy, but then I realized he's actually pretty funny. If Kelso's character, His character Kelso in the '70s show is just hysterical. Like everything he does, he's just so silly. But I gotta say that speech he had, I think for Nickelodeon Awards or the Teen Choice Awards or something about teenagers. He talked about how to be successful and all this stuff. I mean, what a speech! I mean, just a great, humble, self-deprecating, super friendly, super intelligent speech. Like I really thought, wow, this guy isn't full of shit. Like this guy's really good. So I love that about him. But just his humor, he always cracks me up because he gets like all flustered in movies, and the way he reacts to his frustration is just so funny. So I had to put him in here, and I just think he's my number 7. So I love him. He's great. Number 6 for me. Number 6 would be John C. Reilly. Now John C. Reilly, he's the guy that's in most of the movies with like Will Ferrell, and he kind of can do his own solo act, but he's really good with a duo. I loved him in Step Brothers. I loved him in Ricky Bobby, the Talladega Nights movie, and I remember when he was kind of just like a straight up actor, like in The River Wild, and he was also a straight up actor in like Days of Thunder, and he was pretty good, but like he was so silly looking. I'm like, this guy can't be a serious actor because he's so funny looking. So of course I think he kind of went with his gut and said, screw the straight up act. I'm going to be just humorous and fun. Well, I just think he's so naturally funny because it almost like he has to, because he's just a very interesting looking human being. And I don't mean that negatively, but I also don't mean it positively. So I think that he has to be funny. And in my opinion, he really is very funny. So I love all the stuff he's in. If you want to see a really funny movie with him, where he's a solo act, no help from Will Ferrell, is, in my opinion, the movie Cedar Rapids. He's very funny in that movie with Ed Helms and Anne Hesh. And another movie I think he's funny in is Cyrus, which is with Jonah Hill and I believe Marissa Tomei. He's just like naturally funny. And it's just a movie. He's just an actor I think that could make me laugh no matter what he does. He could just wear like a really tight t-shirt and these goofy like jorts, and it would be hysterical. He's just that kind of guy. He just has a goofy face, and every time I see him, I just laugh. Like I never am bored with him on television or in a movie theater. So he's got to be in there. He's my number 6. All right, so about halfway done right now. Going to go from 5 to 1. Just going to do a quick recap. So my number 10 was Jake Johnson. My number 9 was Jason Segel. My number 8 was Paul Rudd. My number 7 was Ashton Kutcher. And my number 6, who I just talked about, was John C. Reilly. All right, so 5 to 1. These are real funny ones now. All right, number 5, Zach Galifianakis. I laugh at everything he does. Every single thing he does, I think, is genius. I've been told he's the kind of actor where he smokes a lot of pot. So a lot of his movies deal with him being stoned, and most of it's a lot of improv, and it's just genius humor. So I really, really appreciate that. I just think that that's just him shooting right off the hip. I'm not saying to do drugs, but for him, it's like, Zach, you keep smoking up, dude, because you're absolutely hysterical when you're high. So he's just the kind of guy that no matter what he does or what he says, just like John C. Reilly, just looking at him, I just start to laugh. Like, he's just so funny looking. In the movie that he did, The Campaign, with Will Ferrell, and I thought his accent and his attitude and his flamboyancy was just so funny. And I just think that he's been good ever since I saw him back in like 2002 in the movie Out Cold with one of the London brothers. Like, I loved him in that movie. Everything he's done, he's just always kind of goofy. And he has this huge, thick beard and this big old gut, and he's short, and he has like a high voice. It's just like, how is that not funny every time you see him or every time you hear him talk? And in most of the movies he does, they're great. I mean, The Hangover is Alan. My God, he's just, oh my God, he's so funny in that movie. And every time I see him, I just laugh. And the movie that I actually thought he was hysterical in, that I think it did awful in theaters, and I don't think people even realize he's in the movie, is the movie Dinner for Schmucks with Steve Carell. And I believe Paul Rudd's in that too. But he plays the guy that's kind of the nerdy tech guy that just works all hours of the night at this everyone's home and he's still working, and he just has this very just weird attitude about himself where he like puts this eye contact like daze in people, and he's just like, I really shoot. It's like what the hell? It's like what the hell? But it's so funny. But Zach Galifianakis, so funny. He's my number 5. My number 4. This was a really hard one for me. From 4 to like 2, I was like almost like close my eyes and pick. I had to really think about this. My number 4 is Ben Stiller. And again, all these guys that I mentioned are living. My number 4 is Ben Stiller, just because since I was a kid, he's made me laugh all the way dating back towards, like, my God, like Heavyweights. That was great. The movie, it wasn't even Reality Bites. Like, he was just kind of whatever cool in that movie. And I remember, seeing him and, knowing that he directed The Cable Guy and just knowing all that stuff about him. Like, this guy's got to be great. And I remember him as Tony Perkis in Heavyweights, that he was such a dick, but he was like a funny dickhead. Like, he took himself so serious in the role that he was funny because of it. And then, of course, the movies that, in my opinion, the movie that really put him on the map, in my opinion, is Meet the Parents, which came out in 2000. That's a fantastic movie and hysterical. But that movie, I thought, really put him on the map, because after that movie, I'm like, I want to see every Ben Stiller movie that comes out. And I have. I've seen every single one since Meet the Parents. And I just think he's just so naturally funny, because he can either play a glutton for punishment, kind of like pussified, like very just wimpy male, or he can play a real big, goofy, dickhead alpha male. And he can always do A to Z so well. And I just love when he does those extremes. And if he does anything in between, it's never good. And I always kind of thought, him as Larry in Night at the Museum kind of put him in the middle from that A to Z difference of extremes. From the extreme of Tony Perkis to the extreme of Greg Fokker from Meet the Parents. But then you have him right here in the middle of Night at the Museum, and I didn't like that as much. I liked the movie Night at the Museum, but I didn't like his character as much for how he was portraying it, because I just liked him at both ends. So I love Ben Stiller when he plays just an extreme, crazy dickhead kind of guy, or just a huge pussy. Like, they're so funny, and he does them perfectly. He was amazing in Heartbreak Kid. I just love that kind of stuff. Anyway, my number 3. My number 3 is Robin Williams. Now, a lot of people get the shits of this guy. I think he's great in everything he does. I think he's funny. I think he has a real passion for acting. I think he has an incredible talent for humor. I think that he could probably make anybody laugh. I think he can make a deaf man laugh from standing behind him. He's just that kind of guy that just gives off this amazing sense of humor. And the fact that he just doesn't give a shit who you are, he'll still act the same way. I respect that, appreciate that. He doesn't change his ways for anybody. I love that about Robin Williams. When I think of humor, I think of like Mrs. Doubtfire. I think of that movie right off the bat, because he was amazing in that movie and just so funny. And I even think of him as Genie from Aladdin, 1993 Disney movie, Aladdin. He was funny in that. I even think about his chops, his acting chops, showing his dramatic side in Good Will Hunting, when he played the character Sean, who was the psychologist for Will Hunting, which was Matt Damon. He won an Oscar award for that. Like, he's an amazing actor, but his humor is what really got him on the map. And I just think he's so naturally funny. And he's just a guy that no matter what he does, no matter what interview kind he does, and whatever it is, it's always funny. He could be endorsing or going out for promos for a real serious movie, but he'd be funny as hell talking about it. And that just, to me, shows that he's just so naturally funny that he might use it as an excuse because he's nervous. Like, he uses humor to kind of cope for stuff that he's kind of keeping behind a fence. And I get that total. That's how I get sometimes when I'm nervous. I always want to crack jokes. So I totally appreciate that and can totally just like understand why he is that way, because that's the way I get sometimes. So I just really thought that Robin Williams is just one of the funniest guys ever. And I just think he's always just a good actor in most movies. So he's my number 3. I love him in everything he does. Number 2. Again, this was hard to put in for number 2 because he could have been 3 or 4. with Ben Stiller and Robin Williams. But I'm going to say this just because I've seen every movie and I could quote just about every line, and that's Jim Carrey. Again, he's another one like Robin Williams people get the shits of. I have never really gotten the shits of. I think he's absolutely hysterical, and he is a genius comic, just like Robin Williams. He's genius. If you want to go back to it, look at Mad TV. When he was on Mad TV, he was the only white guy on that show, and he made that show. Like, that show was more for the urban, the urban crowd, which is totally cool. And I think, all the actors in there were okay, in my opinion. I thought Damon Wayans was great. And I thought that David Alan Grier was pretty good. But I would watch Mad TV just for Jim Carrey. And that's not because I'm white or anything. I just thought he was the funniest. And I just remember seeing him as Fire Marshal Bill. And, he had the lisp as the police officer. And he was also Bob Jackson, the karate instructor. Like, they were just the best bits ever. And he was also the background guy that would do all the crazy stuff when a newscaster was talking. He was the best at that. And then he got into movies. And I remember his first big role, I think, was Ace Ventura: Pet Detective in like 93, 94. And then he had a slew of movies. Cable Guy, The Mask, all the Truman Show, all those movies. And I just laugh so hard at the stuff he does. And if you want to see a real sweet side of Jim Carrey, a real genuine nice guy, but hysterical at the same time, check out the 1996 comedy Liar Liar. He is incredibly, incredibly funny in that movie. And he's also just a really good guy, and after he has to, show that he really loves his son. But I just love everything about Jim Carrey. I think he's always funny. I thought the last movie that I really laughed that he did was probably Yes Man. I thought Burt Wonderstone was terrible. I was so happy that was over. But Yes Man I thought was really good. And if you want to see a real creepy movie that he's in, check out The Number 23. That was a weird movie. But at the same token, I think he's just a naturally gifted actor who can just, make people laugh, And I also think that he's one of those guys who's a naturally gifted comedian that can kind of act too. Like, he can do both, and it's amazing because he can really turn on the drama side, and he can really, really turn on the comic side. So I just love Jim Carrey, just all the years of him just making me laugh. And also, in my opinion, I haven't said this yet, his greatest movie, to me, Dumb and Dumber. Lloyd Christmas with the chipped tooth, love it. I mean, that's probably my all-time favorite comedy. And I always think of him when it comes, I always think of that movie when it comes to Jim Carrey. I could see him now and I'll be like, oh, Lloyd Christmas. Like, I cannot wait for the sequel coming out in November. Cannot wait for that with Jeff Daniels. But yeah, Jim Carrey, number 2. All right. So to run down my list real quick before I get to number 1, my list again follows. Number 10, Jake Johnson. Number 9, Jason Segel. Number 8, Paul Rudd. Number 7, Ashton Kutcher. Number 6, John C. Reilly. Number 5, Zach Galifianakis. Number 4, Ben Stiller. Number 3, Robin Williams. And number 2, who I just talked about, Jim Carrey. So my number 1 starts as early as 1995. And this guy came on the scene for me on Saturday Night Live. And for me, I thought he was like a tall, goofy-looking guy, just your very typical suburban white dude. Just the guy that wears the polo shirt, or he wears the button down that's just sleeve length, and he has the glasses on. He's just always so goofy-looking. But Will Ferrell, I remember seeing him as early as 1995 with Saturday Night Live, and I started seeing his bits and seeing his comedy skits, and I thought he was funny as hell. I loved everything he did as Greg the cheerleader, the Spartan cheerleader from Saturday Night Live, to Alex Trebek on Celebrity Jeopardy, and I just thought and my God, Robert Goulet, his impression there, and George W. Bush impression, like everything he did was so naturally gifted and just so funny that there's no way you could write for him. In my opinion, so a comedy writer that wants to write for Will Ferrell is kind of like having an offensive coordinator for Peyton Manning. It's just not gonna. You don't need them. They're not there. You do not need them because they can do it themselves. They're a king of forest. Will Ferrell is a king of forest of comedy. Like Peyton Manning's a king of forest of being a quarterback. Like, you just don't need any help. And I feel like Will Ferrell has such a great range of humor that he can just do whatever he needs to do. And I love the guy. I think he's hysterical. My favorite movie of him, probably all time, I would probably say Frank the Tank from Old School, just because, my God, he was so like normal and straight arrow, and but he was also just a huge pervert and nut job and drunk at the same time, and like it was just such a funny like transition, and I think he's great in that. I loved him in Step Brothers as Brendan Huff. I loved him in Talladega Nights as Ricky Bobby. I loved him. I loved him in everything. I even thought the movie Kicking and Screaming was really funny with Robert Duvall and Mike Ditka. I thought he was great in that movie. When it comes to his serious side, I have a hard time buying it. It's like, it's okay. I don't mind it. I just really enjoy when he plays just a total goofball or just being himself. And every time he's on, like, you know, like a late night or a late show or a Tonight Show, he's hysterical. Everything he does is funny. And I love how he always has some kind of part in, like, the ESPYs where he'll, like, accept an award for someone, but he'll pretend like it's him. Like, he pretended like he was Tiger Woods one time, and that was one of the funniest things ever. You can look that up on YouTube. It's a bit he did as accepting an award as Tiger Woods, and the stuff he says is great. And he talks about his sponsors, and there's no way they'd be his sponsors in real life. So he's just, to me, just the most naturally funny person, and I just really appreciate everything he's done for Hollywood. And he's just a very positive guy, too. Out of all the guys I've talked about, I think most of them are, you know, pretty positive, but I feel like they all probably keep to themselves a little bit. But Will Ferrell's the kind of guy, no matter where he's at, I feel like he always brings out positiveness of everybody. And that's kind of what makes people want to be laughing from what he has to say. Because if you make someone feel comfortable, my God, you're going to make them laugh. You know, and that's what Will Ferrell does. I think he makes everyone feel comfortable because he's such a goofball that you're just ready to laugh. And every movie, I just absolutely love that he's in. But anyway, that's my list of the top 10 actors who are currently living who I find to be the funniest. So, again, I'll probably have some more lists coming up in the future, and I'm sure some more Blu-ray updates, and hopefully some in-theater reviews. That should be coming up very soon. Until then, you take it easy, NK.